or Carrie, why don't you start and say what our positions are? So.
Okay, I'm Carrie Smith, Human Resource Director. We've spoken a couple different times.
Okay, and then to our left is John.
John Okeson, County Commissioner.
Erica Jepson, County Commissioner.
David Meyer, County Commissioner.
And I'm Barry Nelson. I'm in the center if you're County Commissioner.
Richard Varberg, County Commissioner.
And Pat Albany, County Administrator.
Okay.
And, we just,
go ahead.
Peggy just left the room to grab some documents. You have contact with her, our administrative assistant. So she'll be back in a moment and give us some information about you.
Sure. So I'm Tessa Melvin. I have worked at David Drown for about 8 years. I started the class and portion of the company. Before that, I was a city administrator in Maple Plain, and I was assistant in Shoreview, and then I also worked at Dakota County. So I have 15 years of practical local government experience. Then I came over to David Drown's to build the class and comp because it was something our clients had asked for. And our job is to, work with clients on whatever their needs are. And I'll talk a little bit about it, but I can just mention now that, for classification systems, we use probably 13 to 15 different ones. So we want to make sure that it's customized to you and we don't make you change your system just to change it. So, and I think right now we're working with probably 47 of the counties. And I did meet a couple of you at the AMC conference.
Thank you. And we've had a couple of elected officials just walk in. Our Sheriff Glander and County Attorney Brian McDonald just came in. I do have to say your company is very highly recommended and your reputation is very good. Julie Ring from AMC has high accolades for your company. So we're happy. It's unfortunate that this delay has, and I think that's mainly on our part. I mean, and I think we had some concerns, and it's been difficult from our part, and so it's kind of it's in our court. But we thought we'd start a fresh start. We want to make sure that the questions that employees have sometimes are answered, and we want to make sure we have buy-in, as much buy-in as we can, because we know that it's not going to be favorable for everyone. So. It is 8. Let's start with we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, being it's 8:15.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, before we get started with the class and comp study, we have one other item, Tessa, that we are going to do, and it's an item with our sheriff. It's authorizing the county sheriff to purchase what?
Oh, no, just 10.
Oh, sorry, the quotes. So we're going to go to him, and then it'll only take just a short moment. So Sheriff Glander.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Before you have a quote for some items for the jail. I do not have that quote. I gave everything to you, sorry. But it's like 49.58, I believe, is what the
49.68.60.
Yes. And this is all under a grant. Came to my attention that there was 18,000 left in the grant that was not used. It was intended to be used to help with staff for medical, which that did not come through with ACH. So we'd like to make some purchases using that grant.
Okay. And this is just kind of a housekeeping item, so.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve it.
We have a motion.
I'll second.
A second, Sheriff Glander.
One more thing, sorry. We would probably buy some smaller items too that would be covered under our spending limits. So, but it would still be covered by the grant.
Yep. Any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thanks,
Glander.
Todd.
All right, Tessa, is it okay to call you Tessa, or do you want, I mean, I know you have your doctorate, right?
Yep, I am, but no, Tessa is fine.
Okay. Okay. then I think we'll ask you, you have a PowerPoint to present. We'll, if, however you want to start.
Yeah,
So
sure.
we'll
I'm
move
just
forward.
going to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So again, my intent is I just kind of did this so that I could get a handle on what has happened, kind of the project scope, and then just like next steps and to understand kind of the board's expectations. So this is just a like a informal like how to help me kind of capture that. So please ask questions at any time. Don't wait until the end because this is your meeting. So up until today, the recap of the work that's been done, the jobs were scored. A 14 grade compensation grid was created. Employees reviewed and resubmitted the job evaluation tool with changes, and jobs then were evaluated and classified. And then a grade 19 grade compensation grid was created, and there was a cost analysis. The project scope entailed market analysis, job classification, review of jobs, recalibration of your current compensation grid, and then just that cost analysis. When I look at the current wage scale, and again, so my job is just to kind of come in here fresh. I'm not here to look at what Mark did or, you know, and comment on that, but how I would approach it, and then just kind of making sure that we're meeting your expectations. But when I look at your current wage grids, because you have more than one, there's not a consistent wage spread. So from the min to the max, it varies. So department heads have a larger range from their min to their max, and then supervisors have a little bit less, and then employees have less. And that is totally fine. Not all entities do that, but that is a philosophy of the board to how do you pay employees. I always say the market data tells you where you are to the market, but the board gets to decide how do we want to pay? So where do we want to be in relation to the market? And then how fast do we want to get there? So some of these things I'm going to talk about is kind of pay philosophy that maybe not this board set, but a previous one did, or you are in agreement or you want to change. And that's kind of the discussion I want to have. You have differing grids by the unions. So that's just, you know, ideally one pay grade would be great because then it's easier to maintain, it's equitable for all, but that doesn't always happen. And currently you use decision band method. So, and I know when you came with DDA, you moved over to the JET or the job evaluation tool, which is a point factor. And I just wanted to kind of explain the differences. So the JET was created by us. So me, I did it just for the public sector. Decision band was created for the private sector, and it definitely works for the public. A lot of entities use it. But it looks at responsibility within the organization, supervisory difficulty, and complexity of the job. And it basically predetermines a job classification based on the decision making, because all jobs create or make decisions, and that's how that looks at it. In the point factor system, it more looks at the job description. So the education, experience, and skill needed for the job, responsibilities, effort, both like mental, physical, working conditions, and it can be applied to a wide range of jobs and newly created jobs. Disadvantages of the point factor is, you know, that they're point factors and it is subjective. Just like in decision band method, it's subjective because it's someone is evaluating it. But the decision band method doesn't account for licensures and those kind of certifications or communication. So I always like the communication piece because it identifies who are you communicating and what are you communicating to them. So the market, when it came back, the market analysis, you've been using DBM for 40 years. You currently have 32 grades. And again, your wage spread varies. Its average is about 33, but some of your positions have 47% spread. Some have 41, and then most of them have 33. The market has 34. So on average, you're right where you where the market is. About 4% under on the market average minimum rate. So again, if the job were administrative assistant, we take all of your benchmarks and average out the min and average out the max. To me, that tells you where you're having issues for recruitment if we're low on the min, and retention if we're low on the max. And you're about 5% under market average maximum rates. Now, with that, not all jobs kind of fell in there. Some deviated more than 20% of market average, meaning they were under market. And I would say when I see anything that deviates more than 9%, I flag it and say, is it the job description? Like maybe this isn't a apples to apples match, it's an outlier. Is it the classification? Is the job description not up to date? Those type of things. So based on where you are to the market, this is kind of the discussion points for the board. And I want to make sure that the board had say or the option to speak and clearly identify kind of where do you want to be to the market? Do you want the same wage spread for all, or do you like kind of stacking it like department heads have a larger wage spread than supervisors and employees? And how fast do you want to get to your desired pay philosophy?
That's a question.
Yeah.
The ones that were presented before, are they at 100%? The band and grade of 14 and 20?
They were calibrated, I think, about 2% above, 2 to 3% above market average. With the intent there is you have more than 10 steps. So typically, most entities have about 8 to 10 steps. So in my professional opinion, I would like to see you guys a little bit above market if you maintain the 12 steps, because you want that 10 step to be competitive. And then the 12 steps are because you value tenure, you value, those type of things. So I would say they were calibrated. Not all jobs were calibrated to that 2 or 3%, meaning some deviated higher and some deviated lower. My goal when I look at this is to make sure they're as close to your pay philosophy as needed. Now, some of those positions are going to be higher than market, and it might be a market need. Like right now, we know that county attorneys are harder to get, deputies and whatever. So those positions are generally above that pay philosophy because of union negotiations and just of the market demand. Anything that requires like a certification or specialization in education, those are just harder to recruit. So sometimes that pay philosophy may vary. What I'm presenting to you gets you to, I would say about 5% above the market max. Not all jobs are right at that 105, and that's typical because it averages out on the calibration. But those jobs that I identified would be maybe a little bit higher than that. And that's something that I will definitely show the board if you agree to what pay grid, where those jobs are and kind of where they're calibrated, because that's a decision for the board to look at. But I wanted to just kind of have this 10,000 foot level, making sure that you guys are on board with where you want to be and how we want to get there.
Okay, thank you.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tessa, I have a question. This is
Yeah.
David Meyer. We had talked to another consultant for our band and grade, and he had stated that if you have more than, what was it, 30 to 40% of your jobs that are actually in the market with a value, a pay value, then the study's not as accurate. Is that correct? Or because we have probably in the current one that you guys have done, we have probably 40% of our jobs that are not, there's no pay value, there's no market value pay, no data. Is that a common thing, or is that, so how do you determine, if that's
Sure.
the case, how do you determine the market value?
Yeah, nope, that's actually a great question. So most, I'm going to kind of give our approach, and I'm going to kind of give what most consultants do. Most consultants will take, if you have 100 jobs, they'll take 20 to maybe 30 jobs, and they'll say they're your benchmark jobs. And they'll pull the data on those jobs to say, these are apples to apples. So like, sheriff, deputy, social worker, admin assistant, jobs that are very similar throughout organizations that could be complete apples to apples, usually has a mix of union, non-union jobs, supervisory, whatever. They will then use that information to start calibrating your data. So I think what the consultant was meaning, they take those jobs and they start calibrating and saying, if we have these right, the rest will fall in line because of their classification. So that's one approach. When we look at the collection of market data, we do it a little bit different in meaning that we actually take the rosters from all counties and all of the benchmarks. So we do have data for all of your jobs, and we will pull all jobs to your, I don't know if you've seen the analysis tab where it kind of says sheriff deputy, current min, current max, benchmark min, benchmark max, and kind of the percent where you are to it. We call that the analysis tab. If it has 5 match points, it would get pulled there. But all other positions, you would be able to see what we pulled and what we got, meaning we could look at them and say, well, you know, not a lot of counties have this position, but we do have some information. The classifications and the updated job descriptions will help then with those that aren't pulled on there to make sure they're calibrated within internal equity. So that's the pay equity piece, meaning that it looks at how your organization goes from top to bottom, and then the market competitiveness we would look at because we pulled the data. Does that answer your question?
Yes, we still have jobs here that there's no data for though, no market value data.
Okay, well, and I can look at that. So if that's like a concern, we can look at that. I would do it kind of like maybe in a workshop, so we could look at literally the ones we pulled and then the ones that we got data or who we looked at for that information. When I looked in, we had most jobs had some data points. Again, most consultants, when they do it, they will only do your benchmark group of those, you know, 20 to 30 jobs, and that's how they calibrate it. We will look at every job and we can highlight the ones we didn't have data for. It could just be because you have a career ladder, like in the engineering department, maybe you have engineer tech 1, 2, 3, senior tech. Well, no one else had a 2 and a 3, so that might be part of that. But we can, if that's what you want, like for next step, we can lay it out to the market again that Mark pulled, and then we can look at what was found, where you're at, and then if you decide on a pay grid or kind of that pay philosophy, if we calibrate it where those jobs would fall in.
This is Erica. Can you explain a little bit the advantages of having a wage spread the same for all employees or having it higher at the, you know, the top of our scale?
Yeah, nope, that's a great question. So typically we see wage spreads for the majority are kind of all the same. That meaning you just kind of set it up, it's more of a consistent piece, especially for all your unions, it's the same. But the philosophy behind maybe why you would have like department heads or supervisors a little bit wider would be that they might be harder to recruit for, so you can't just recruit right away like in the area. Do you know what I mean? So you have to be a little bit more attractive, like St. Louis County. They actually have 2 separate scales for their department heads and their staff, because when they do a recruitment, it's more of a statewide or national recruitment for department heads. So that's kind of the pay philosophy behind that. The other piece behind that is some industries, when they pay it, like I'm just going to use electrical. You don't have electrical, but they typically max out at 3 steps. So meaning they get there a lot quicker than most. Most counties are between that 8 to 10 steps, and their ranges are about 30, 35, maybe 40. You'll have some counties that do like performance-based pay, meaning instead of moving them a step, you have your performance review and then they move a percentage. Their wage spread is going to be about 67%. So really big, but you don't move necessarily the same pace. Does that answer your question?
Yep. And then
Okay.
I just have one more. So
Yeah.
with this new scale, we're at a 12-step and we were at a 10-step. So what is the advantage of going from a 12-step or from a 10-step to a 12-step, or disadvantages?
Sure. Yep, that's a great question. So 8 to 10 is again kind of where the market's at. So that would be like kind of the market average. Generally speaking, if you have more than 10 step, it's because you're going to pay that step 11 and 12 slightly above market, meaning you reward for that tenure. As people become more competent and move through that, they're worth more to the organization. Do you know what I mean? Because they're able to handle more responsibilities in that. So that's kind of a philosophy of we value the tenure of our employees. We're such a great place to work that people will stay the 8 to 10 years, and we want to reward for that.
So one of my thoughts about that is, you know, we had several positions when we moved to this 12-step, the max where we're saying we want to it at a higher market value to retain them. But we have positions that are at a pay freeze now,
Sure.
but they don't really seem to be above market value. Like what I'm seeing, I'm not seeing them 11 and 12 steps significantly above market value. That
Sure.
would
And that's
make that advantage for us to be at 12 steps.
Yep, and that's a great point. So that was one of the things that I did in what I'm proposing. The other piece, and I'm just throwing this out. I'm not saying you have to do it, but one thing that we are noticing, and I'm just gonna use the sheriff deputy. So like that's a position that usually is in one grade. When you grade it, it's based off of the job description. We are seeing because of the market and just the recruitment and retention issues, we're seeing kind of a career ladder. So that might be a way of addressing some of that for some of those positions, meaning you have a deputy one comes in with, you know, their licensure and all of that. And then maybe after 5 years there, they move to a deputy two, which would be that grade above them because they're able to handle more complex cases. Do you know what I mean? And they're just able to handle. So that could address your concern. I did try to push that 11 and 12 a little bit higher than the market. But again, I didn't want to do too much without this conversation, meaning that I want to make sure you guys are setting the pay philosophy. Yep, we want 12 steps and we'd like those 11 and 12 to be 5, 6, whatever percent above market. And it doesn't always have to be meaning you move the next year. Sometimes they're like 2-year increments. Do you know what I'm saying? Like you move to step 11 and then you wait 2 years to move to the next one. So that those are things that we see also. Are there more questions on that?
I think we're good.
Are there thoughts on kind of, yes, we agree with Commissioner on having 12 steps and we'd like to see that? Because then I just want to make sure I am giving you what you're asking for.
I really like the idea of doing that because we,
Okay, perfect.
deputies, like you said, deputies specifically are, you know, as Detroit Lakes, we have the state patrols here and, you know, our attorneys have a new, the state has put a new office here. So we have, you know, very stiff competition to
Sure.
retain these people. So I like that. I like the thoughts that you're bringing to us. So I
Okay,
think I'd see some heads nodding and
Yep.
especially
Yeah,
the
I
2
agree.
years for those 11 and 12 would probably,
I like that idea too, that once you get
Sure.
to step 10, you know, 11 or I
Yep.
guess 10, you would wait 2 years to get to 11, wait 2 years
Sure.
to get to 12. Is that what?
yeah.
Yeah.
yep. And so in doing that, I just have one question with that. So right now, the way the pay grid was calibrated for you, and this is kind of why I want to have this discussion, it was like you start out at a 3.5% step increase, meaning I come in and that's my step increase, and it descends, it gets less as I'm here. Would you be okay with making those step 11 and 12 higher so you can get to that? Do you know what I mean? So you're rewarding for that tenure.
Yeah, especially when it's a 2-year gap, it
Yeah.
might make sense to.
Perfect. Okay. And then with that, so I just want to make sure that you guys are clear and kind of a decision and what that means. When you have steps that decrease, meaning if I'm at a step 10, I'm just going to actually show you because I'm talking with my hands and you can't see me. So my mom said if I didn't have my hands, I couldn't talk. So I apologize. So in this grid, you descend. So you start at 3.25, and you go 3, 3, 3, 2.75. The thought behind this process is you're such a great place to work. People will stay there. It is a cheaper option for the board, meaning Obviously, if I'm making 2815, a 2.5% increase would be less than if we flipped it and started at 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, 333, 3.25. So my question to the board would be, do you like this descending step increase? Would you like them all consistent except those last two? Or do you want it flipped where you start lower because we're not sure if you're a great employee, and as you stay here and show your worth, we'll reward for that?
I kind of like that one.
I'm a little indifferent because the lower end is, as you gain the 3% or is going to be almost the same as 325 when you get your added pay. So that, as you get more pay, the increases financially are probably would be close to equal. So I'm a little, I don't have a real strong opinion.
So, I'm sorry. So if I get this correctly, we could do this, but we would want to make step 11 and 12 higher than 2.5%.
Probably. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you could keep this model and maybe then here it's maybe 3.5%. Do you know what I mean? That would just set you a little bit more above there. You don't get it until you move in there. Now, again, steps don't equate to tenure. I don't want anyone listening thinking, well, I've been here 11 years, so I'm going to come in at step 11 and then move. That is not the case unless you guys found a whole bunch of money and have unlimited funds. You move in the same way, and I can't undo what was done in the past. So this kind of moves forward, but it does allow your employees, when they hit those steps, they're going to get a bigger bump for the value and their competencies and what they bring to the organization.
Yeah, I like the idea of having 11, 12 a little higher.
Yeah,
Perfect. Okay.
I do too.
So I will recalibrate this. Like I said, I think this conversation has been very helpful because I understand that you do want a reward for tenure, and as you become more competent, reward for that because you do offer more to the organization. So that's helpful. I just wanted to move, whoops, here. So I created a 16-step system because I didn't know the background of what you liked and didn't like. And then when I talked to the HR group, they said that I should create a 20-grade step. So meaning the grades are what is evaluated through the classification. So I did both. I'm just highlighting here, these were jobs I reclassified, meaning I felt that they were undervalued or overvalued to what the market shows and the integrity of the system. So I understand that employees filled out their JET document and then jobs are reclassified. Typically what I would do is I would have a job classification appeal process at that point to say, Commissioner Nelson, I view your job as a grade 10. Here's, kind of the reasoning behind that. If you feel like it was undervalued or something's missing in the job description, you would have that appeal, and then I would review it, bring it back to the board, and the board would kind of decide on that. What happened was people refilled out their JET, which is a job evaluation tool. And I feel that some people tried to inflate it to get the desired outcome. And I don't like that because it challenges the integrity of the system. And I'm not saying that the classification isn't warranted or whatever, but I would rather come there together in a conversation versus having an employer supervisor inflate a position to say, well, now this position needs 10 years of experience. No, it doesn't, and the market wouldn't support that. I also wouldn't want to have a job description for the county that is inflated, and if you hired, you would round hole square peg your way out of good candidates, meaning you have too high a qualifications and no one would be, in there. I always say that go ahead, sorry.
Oh, Tessa, I just want to say, I think we're aware of that also, and we were going to have some review process before.
Perfect.
So we are aware, and I appreciate you putting your recommendation in this new year study, so.
Perfect. And I was just going to add, if anyone is listening, because I can't see everyone who's listening, I always say your job description is written as if everyone wins a lottery and we're hiring for tomorrow. So what is needed for the position? It is not about the person and it is not about the performance. So when I was a city administrator, I have a doctorate degree. I'm not going to get paid at that level because it's not required. I also am a TIG welder and I can weld the snowplow for a public works truck. I'm not going to get paid for that because if you put that in my job description, you would have a really hard time finding a city administrator that could do that. So I just wanted to identify some of these I just felt weren't as market competitive or over the market. And it could be your pay philosophy that we value that and this position is unique and whatever, but I want to have that conversation with the group, not them just trying to make the thing. So I appreciate that you understand that too and you see that. I think this will help clear up that process. So this is just a 16 grade system. Again, it I it is going to look different than what you saw. I moved basically I went in literally to every job. I looked at the job evaluation. I recalibrated so it would match market competitiveness. Some of those jobs are going to be above that and I would say the market warrants it. It's just hard to find those jobs and you're going to need to pay there to get there. Internal equity would say if the job is in this value, it'll be paid similarly and we'll pass pay equity. Um, the only difference here, obviously, with the 20 grades is you have more grades. It does help some of the compression issues. And I'm just going to use like social services supervisor and social worker, because of the way it is in a 14 or 16, there's sometimes a compression between that. This allows there to be a little bit more spread between the supervisory of that position and social worker. It would also allow you, and I'm not saying you have to do this, but if you wanted to create like a social worker 1 and 2, so that internally you're creating a career ladder that rewards people for staying and being more competent, meaning after 5 years, they can move to that next grade because they're able to handle more complex cases and that type of suggestion. So if someone were to ask my professional opinion, I would say I like the 20 or even a couple more because it allows you to have room to grow in the future if you create those internal career ladders. And a career ladder basically says we have one position like a social worker, but we want to create a 2 or a senior or a lead because we want to keep our people and we want them to grow in place. So some people really like career ladders and some people don't. So that is, again, your HR, your county administrator, and the board to discuss that. But I like it because it rewards the people as they grow. You don't just move there because you're breathing. You have to be in good standing performance. You have to be able to mentor and train and onboard new employees and those type of things. So I just like it. I'm definitely seeing an increase in like correctional officers, dispatch, deputies, social workers, because we see, especially in correctional officers, burnout is about year 4, meaning you have a lot of turnover after that. So how can we promote and reward for internal growth? And that's one way of doing it.
Tessa, this Barry again, and I think Pat had mentioned this. Is this an option for performance? With that bigger scale, then would that be a tool for performance pay? Is that similar to the steps?
Sure. Nope. This would still be your step system here. If you want to do performance pay, I would recommend that your wage spread has to be more, like I said, like 40, 50, or 60, because you kind of move the grid and range movement it moves between. Typically, I'm just going to use an example. If this spread were 67%, these are what we call shadow steps. On average, you would say that we're going to reward, if you meet expectations, it's a 3%. Maybe this is a 3% step. If you exceed, it's a 4%. If you want to go to performance pay, you have to train managers that they have to look at the people and performance and not just, oh, I really like Joe, but I don't like Jim. And you have to pay still competitive to the market, because I have some clients that do performance pay and they have that 67% spread. Each year they get a COLA adjustment like everybody else, but their range movement might only be 1 to 2%, meaning I'm never going to catch that carrot at the top. and that's frustrating for me as an employee. So I just want to make sure if that's something you choose to do, we provide training for managers and for employees because you're rewarded different. This I can look at and say, as long as I'm doing my job, I don't get in trouble, I'm not on a performance improvement plan, this is kind of what I can anticipate and budget my own family. If you go to performance pay, you have to kind of change that. And I just would want you to be aware of that and we could have that discussion.
Okay, I guess my question was, can you do performance pay within this 20 or 20 grids scale or the 20 grade grid? And you're saying that would be a different type of grid.
If you're truly going to do performance, usually you have a wider range. Now with that, I would say people should not be moving steps unless they're meeting expectations, meaning this is your job, this is your duties. If you're falling behind, you should have a performance improvement plan and you should be correcting those actions.
Even with this step.
Yes, that's how the steps were intended. You're not, you're not supposed to get a step just because you're there. You're not rewarded just for being there. It should be going back to that performance review to say, hey, Sheila, you're not doing X, Y, and Z. Here's a performance improvement plan. Here's how we're going to grow you. And if you do that, then you'll get that. Right now, we're not going to give you a step increase because your performance, or we're going to maybe give you a smaller adjustment until you meet that performance improvement plan.
Thank you for the explanation.
Yeah. So I costed this one out, and again, this is the 20. So these numbers may not mean anything right now because we're going to recalibrate these 11 and 12. So, but I just wanted to show kind of one of the decisions too is how do you implement? So I think the way it was implemented in the cost you saw, people moved into the grid and then there was an adjustment to try to make sure people got 2.5%. I like to do the 2.5% first because you would do that regardless of DDA or not. That's what you have already agreed. Then we move them into the grid. And then I always say on July 1st because sometimes you want to cut that cost, or sometimes even if you do keep their anniversary step, it's going to be about the middle of the year because some will be in the beginning and some will be in the end. That's what that movement would cost. But this is kind of the other discussion point so that I hear you say I like the step. So one thing is, would you like to see 16 grades, 20, or even 25, whatever you want to see? But then it would help me to have direction on implementation so that the next time we meet, I can show you job classifications and I can show you cost.
I like the 20. Does the board want to settle in on move forward with the 20? I mean,
I think so.
Yeah,
That's fine.
that's good for me.
okay, we're kind of all saying, and with your recommendation, liking the 20, it helps, it gives us pretty good confidence at where we can end up.
Okay. And then as far as implementation, is this kind of what you guys were anticipating for like how you would implement? And I know now we're in a tight crunch, so maybe you give everyone a COLA on January 1st, and maybe because we have to meet again to approve the grid, that movement is February 1st or something like that. I just would like, so I could cost it out so I can show you kind of the cost and then the impact on some of those positions that were maxed out before, making sure that we can fix that. Do you know what I'm saying? That would help me.
Well, typically our COLA is January 1st and then we do our steps on their anniversary date.
Okay,
That's what we do now.
sure.
That's according to policy and contracts.
Correct. Retro.
Yeah.
Retro once the contract's settled.
Yeah, the comments that we've been making is the cost of living would be, no matter when it was implemented, would retro back to January 1.
Okay, perfect.
And then the employees usually take their step on anniversary of their hire.
Sure. Yep.
So it's a little bit tougher for you to, but certainly the COLA would be January 1.
Sure. Okay.
So
And
the
the only
anniversary
reason I
dates.
use July 1st is because the implementation is unusual because you're doing the COLA and then you're doing implementation into the grid. So for some individuals, they might have a 5% just to get them to minimum. Do you know what I mean? And some might just be getting 10 cents difference because they're on a step and they're just moving to a new step. So that's why some entities will say we're going to implement on January 1st or whatever that day, and then everyone gets a step on July 1st this year because we need to budget for that and kind of plan for that. You would still have your performance reviews on your date. If you want to keep your anniversary steps, we can cost that out too.
I guess this is a question to Carrie maybe, or Tessa, maybe you have an answer. Should the anniversary dates, I mean, should we have them all on the same date, or should it, I mean, would it be easier tracking, or would it be easier for, I mean, it would be
Well, I
easier
think she
budgeting?
means this is just for this year. So this is what we would do for this year, and then moving forward, it would be on the anniversary date.
Right,
correct?
but my question,
That's what I meant, yeah.
I think there's several questions. So with how we're structured currently with contracts and policy, you get a step on your anniversary date. So I would anticipate
continue that.
I would anticipate the unions would have some say in that,
Correct, yeah.
because you'd be changing how they move through the grid. As far as changing anniversary dates and such, with performance the performance reviews that we're doing that track on the anniversary, that is spread out so that they don't all fall, for some supervisors and such, all on the same date as well. So I think there's several things.
That it's union, kind of union directed too.
Yeah, and our policy indicates that it's not performance, based pay. It's time and seniority.
So I think we stick with January 1st and higher date, anniversary date.
Yeah, and
I mean, based on what's in our
I
union
think that's
contract.
what we have now. Now, if the board so chooses to move towards, in addition to this, some type of performance-based, she was talking about shadow steps and different things. I think that's something, once we get this done, I think.
Yeah, I think the performance pay would be something we'd look at a later date. I don't think this is.
That's what I would say.
Yeah,
Yes, and a lot of.
I don't think we're at
I don't
that.
think we can take
There's a
that
lot of
on.
training, a lot of implementation, yeah.
Come on, you guys have 2 weeks left of the year. You can do all that.
Ugh. Not saying
Okay,
it would
so-
be a good idea, but.
So I hear, yes, do 20 grades. Yes, we like the descending that 11 and 12 will be higher and we want that above the market. So I will recalibrate that a little bit. I can work with Pat and Carrie and their team to work with the board on a next meeting so I can show you classifications and I can show you cost. And to you, Commissioner, I can show you that there is market data for all positions, or most of them, I should say, and kind of, you know what I mean? Not that we're going to go into the weeds on that, but how our data is collected, and
Yep.
then kind of figure out what that looks like.
Yep, I think that sounds good.
Okay.
Tessa, if I may, I know when I've spoken to you and I know you've asked the board as far as what the pay philosophy is, as far as where they'd like to be in Becker County in comparison to the market. I know when I spoke to you too, you had talked about pre-COVID, post-COVID, and just generally where people are paying as counties as far as where they're in comparable to the market. I think that would be helpful for the board to hear that so they can then make an informed decision of where they want to be.
Sure. So I would say textbook would say if you're within 5% of the market, you're super competitive. Anything less than that, we would say you could lose people for. I would say that is like pre-COVID. With COVID and all the changes and just the economy right now, there is a labor shortage. There's more retirements. If you look at even the private sector entry retail position, they're paying 18, 19, 20 bucks an hour. That's definitely going to push the county's scale. So you have all those things. So what I was mentioning to Carrie's team is, when you look at that pay philosophy, what used to be market average, some entities are choosing to be slightly higher than that. This is not calibrated at that. It would be after step 10 or 11 and 12 that is higher than the market. So that's a great question that Carrie raises is the board comfortable with like that step 10 being market average, or would they like to see that slightly above market?
I think for me, what I would like to see is those positions that are hard to fill, you know,
Sure.
which for us really, for sure, it's our deputies, it seems, and our assistant county attorneys.
Yep.
Custodians.
Custodians, you know, those that,
Yeah,
It's falling, that is falling on all departments that are having a harder time,
oh, sure.
right from environmental people out there to
highway, yeah.
It's, we're seeing it in all departments.
So maybe there isn't a way for us to just
No,
say
it's-
certain
Well,
positions.
and if I may, that's why I was asking the question. I'm asking the question broadly. You know, where do you want Becker County to fall as far as pay philosophy? Do you want it at market? Do you want it slightly above? I mean, where do you want to be?
The benefits aren't in, I mean, do you review what county benefits are compared to other benefits? So if our benefits are better, I
Yeah.
mean, so that's another part
Yep.
of this that we're not looking at right now.
Sure. And
What
that's like,
happens,
oh, go ahead, sorry.
what happens when the economy goes the other way? Because it is moving that way.
Sure.
And we do pay these people too much. And that's just what I'm asking. Where do we go from there? So we have to be careful, especially
Yep.
right now, because I'm just looking at what's going on in our country, and the economy does not look like it's going to be that good in the future. And we have a lot of different manufacturing jobs that we compete with China on right now, right here in
Sure.
town. And I don't know if they're going to be here.
Sure. So one of the questions I heard was, do you look at benefits? This study just looked at wages because while you mentioned that it is total compensation, it is really hard to look at, especially healthcare benefits of like the different levels and all of that. If that's something that you want to look at, you definitely can go ahead and look at that. I would just caution you that not all benefits are valued the same by employees, meaning the younger me really didn't care about health insurance. I just wanted more in my pocket. Now that I'm a mom, I really care about that deductible because I meet it on January 2nd. So I value those differently. Like even like tuition reimbursement, sometimes you offer that, but very few people use it. So I would look at that. Some things you can tangibly look at is like number of paid holidays, what you contribute to like HSA or VEBA or something like that. But it's really hard to kind of do that. And the other piece of it is if you're a great place to work, people will come in and they like it. So that's the other piece too that you can't measure. The question of what about if we are over market today and the market slows down, that's where those COLA adjustments are really, they're not really COLA because they're not following the Social Security index or the labor index. They're really following generally what the market is doing. So I would say a market adjustment. And that's where you kind of slow that down or freeze it, saying we're going to let the market catch up to us if that were the case, like if the economy started to tank and you needed to do that. With going into next year at 2.5, some entities are doing higher than that. So again, while we do this, even if we got everything in order by January 1st, people are moving too. So where you're at isn't going to be where you're at in July, let's say, because unions will have settled in other counties. So I would say kind of look at that as a broad. Yes, we would like to be slightly above market average for our pay philosophy. And then as those last two steps, we want that to be, a little bit higher. That could be a general. You don't have to say we're going to be within 1 or 2%. It doesn't have to be that exact. It's just kind of letting me know where to calibrate. The other thing is once we calibrate it, we have to make sure we can pay for it. So if we run into cost, we might have to say, this is the board's goal, but we're going to have to take 2 years to get there. And here's what year 1 looks like. And here's what year 2 looks like.
Mm-hmm. I also think in regards to our benefits too, we have fantastic benefits if you're a single person. It's where it gets a little different is when you need to take that family insurance.
Sure.
That's where we do lack a little bit.
The last comment, I just wanted to make sure so that the board heard it as well, Tessa, when we've been calibrating and looking at this, I just want to make it clear, that our employees when they're eligible for longevity pay too. This is just based on just complete
Yep.
base rate. So I just,
That's a good
that's
point. Thank
outside
you.
of the table.
That it doesn't take in cash in lieu of either. The
No.
Majority
It's
of the
just-
employees.
It's strictly
Yes.
it's strictly the base
Another
rate.
$4 plus an hour.
Mhm.
Sure.
Tessa, I just want to make a comment on the market value data. So, and I might not have a complete sheet, but when I just did a quick count, and we have roughly 124 jobs in our county.
Yep.
And the data, and market data analysis sheet I have only has 59 jobs on it.
Okay. I
So
will.
So I don't know,
Sure.
I don't know. That's just the information I have. That's what I base it off of, so.
Sure, and that's pretty, so it's pretty typical that you would see less jobs on that analysis, because again, we would say it's not statistically significant if it has less than 5 data points.
Okay.
Meaning of your benchmark group, it might have only had 4, so we didn't pull it. I would say, and I'm not selling you on our service, but I would say we do better than most consultants because we look at the entire roster. They
Okay.
don't. They will only look at 20 to 25 of your jobs that they consider benchmarks. And I just feel like the way we do it when we look at the roster, A, it tells us every job. B, it also tells us organizational structure. So like if you're considering creating a career ladder, we can tell you who else is doing it and kind of what that looks like.
I do also like the idea of, if need to, taking 2 years to implement it instead of, if that comes down to it. So I think.
Yeah. And I know one of the other concerns I gathered from the board was, if we move people in and they're only at that step 1 and they've been here 10 years, how do you look at that? So I would say that's the second part of this, is to look at what it costs to move everyone in, and do we have money or the desire to move them extra, and what would that look like? So we can have that discussion in more depth the next time when I can give you data to look at. If that's okay with you. I just more wanted to kind of give you that 10,000 foot level, and make sure that you guys are, having your, voice heard, and that we're meeting your expectations.
Tessa, we can see your hands, so you're doing good.
Okay. Sorry. So I kind of put the next step is, we kind of talked about this today. I have, and I'm going to just say, just to start calibrating at slightly above average, and we can always go down year 1 and go up year 2. Some entities will do that. 20 grades. We like the 12 steps. The step 11 and 12 will be a little bit higher increase. Once I come back to the board with the classifications and kind of where those jobs are falling in, at that point, we would then send out job classifications to employees. And I would say we have that appeal process to make sure that everyone feels it's not being done to them and they have a say in it. With that, it would be great to have job descriptions finalized. I know that Carrie's team probably can't handle all of that quickly. So that's something to consider if you wanted them written. If you don't, we'll just work with what we have and we'll make it work. And then we would finalize it with that costing.
Do our employees, we have job descriptions completed?
We have some, not all.
Not all, okay.
And when we originally did the proposal to DDA, that was incorporated in with our assistants in the original proposal.
Okay.
Following, just so you know.
Well, I think this has been extremely helpful.
Yes.
So thank you very much.
Okay.
One more
yeah.
question. Do you
Yeah.
recommend that we 20, or do you recommend more grades? What is
I can show you. I like 20. I mean,
Okay.
I always say if you're going to build it, if you build it to 22, I'm okay with that too. It always gives you room to grow. What I don't like to have happen is you're at 20 and then now you have a compression issue and then we have to either recalibrate or whatever. So I like 20. 20 I think is a good number. Up to 25 I would be comfortable with too. I think anything after that you get really compressed. But again, I don't always follow the textbook. I follow more what the market does and what the industries do. So textbook would say, 17, 15 is okay. I just feel that's really tight for especially 124 jobs.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Sounds good, yeah.
Okay, I just want to end on board satisfaction. I just want to make sure that the board feels like they got their chance to speak, select a grid, all of that, and then just let me know what's missing or what else you would expect and vocalize that. I just want to make sure that when we're doing work, it gets implemented and the board is satisfied. Now, I know all employees will not be because not everyone wins the same in implementation, and I'm okay with that, but I'm not okay if the board is not happy with the work that we do.
So my biggest issues, just so you know, were, of course, those positions that we've already talked about, being hard, the deputies and the county attorneys, but also it was, in the scale that we were presented, we had all of the social services supervisors on the same scale.
Yep.
And their job, my background is in human services, so their jobs are very, very different, and the people that they supervise are very, very different. So that
Sure.
was my concern, is I wanted to see them separated, especially the
Sure.
social services supervisors that supervise social workers. They were at a step 8, I believe. Social workers were at a step 7, and the other social workers or the other supervisors were at a step 8, but they were supervising at a step 2 and a step 5.
Sure.
So that was my concern, is just, the education difference, or education requirements were different
Sure.
for the other ones. So that was where I had my biggest issue.
And one of the issues, and I'll use Carrie as an example, Carrie's position, with the county's low underpaying Carrie's position in the past. And so when that scale came out, the thought of the rumor in the employees was self-serving, and the board really, I mean, be honest, but in the board, I don't think was educated enough to say this is not, that we had confidence saying that it was not. I mean, and I think if we move, now that we're being more educated, we can justify that. And I think too, with the 20 steps now, where a position comes into the new scale, like you mentioned earlier, and there was some confusion on that too for me and the board level, thinking that you're going to go to a certain. I was thinking we were probably going to be paying the people that we were greatly underpaying their full, where they should be, and that's not the case. We're putting them in this scale for them to work up to that. So that will help. So these positions, while they're being underpaid, aren't going to be at that top dollar right away. Right. And I think that's something we need to get out to our employees that, but I would like to see through probably negotiations that we bump up those underpaid people, and maybe we give them through negotiations, give them that, a bump and
Like an additional bump, is that what you're saying?
yeah. So when we negotiate that,
Service.
like custodians, I think we're very underpaid, and we want to, instead of, and when they move into the new scale, they're still going to be underpaid. And I think we want to get them.
And I think with that also is, you have somebody that's been here for 10 years is now with this scale going in at a step 3, and we hire somebody that has 5 years of experience, where then, are they going to start at the same wage as somebody that's been here for much longer, or potentially a higher step?
Yeah.
Sure.
So those are some of the things that we've had to wrestle with, and nothing was wrong. I mean, they weren't presented wrong, or it just was a difficult. And I honestly believe that us taking this slow process, painfully slow and painful for us, I mean, for all of us, but I think it will help us be able to justify these changes. So.
Okay.
Also, I would recommend having this conversation I would have really appreciated this conversation at the beginning.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Tessa, another thing, when we did meet with our current employee or the contractor that we do with it, is it Bruce? Bruce? Bob Bjorklund.
Oh, sure.
Highly recommend going with you guys on this. I mean, he said, I don't want to turn down business, but he said, I highly recommend you move forward with them. And that was a good boost of confidence for this board to hear that from someone that we're doing business with. And AMC has been very supportive of your reputation also. So I think we've gained a lot more comfort in moving this forward. So.
Perfect.
And then your presentation today was very informative and I think we're a lot more comfortable, even though it's going to be painful when we enact it. There's still going to be issues, but I think the concern, and you addressed it earlier, that you saw some people that were too high now. I think that was my concern too, that if we're too high, we're not going to appeal to get someone to drop. I would rather have them appeal to go up a band or a grade than down.
Especially
Right.
those positions that aren't hard to fill,
Yeah.
you know, that are,
Sure.
you know, on the higher end.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that your conversation today is good because, you know, implementation is always painful. Because you don't have an unlimited checkbook. The other piece for employees to hear and they don't like is that to date, if we moved everyone to the maximum, you're asking us to pay today's rate for yesterday's work, meaning the economy wasn't like this 1, 2, 3 years ago. So, and we can't undo past HR or board practices. Do you know what I mean on hiring? So it is difficult. And I get it. I just encourage employees to look at this as hopefully they feel like it is transparent because they're part of the process with their job description. And even if you come in at a step 5, that is okay. Your continued growth adds to your top 5. Do you know what I mean for para? And so think about that whole picture. I get that everyone wants everything right away, but unless you guys find gold, it just doesn't happen that way. But I think as I am an employee, I feel valued if I see where we're going and I know what that looks like. Part of why we do what we do for clients, and I always say like our ongoing maintenance where we work with clients every year, is because your employees are your greatest asset, but they're your most expensive piece of it. So I always say ongoing maintenance is similar to the highway department and their pavement improvement plan, where you look at the road surface every year and you do crack filling and seal coating and you maintain that so that the board is in charge of minimal changes versus having, okay, now you're at a 10% gap and you need to fix that today.
Thank you for that explanation.
Yeah.
That really helps.
Well, thank you, Jess. One more question. So when you work on this on the 20,
Yep.
20-step grid,
Yep.
you're going to incorporate the employees that you're going to put them where you think, with the when they presented their new PAQs and they escalated, they say they're escalated what they maybe should, you're going to pull them back into where you think they should be? Is that correct?
I am. So my job is to protect the integrity of the system. And if I'm just going to use an example, like, so for the accountant position, it said that it needed a CPA.
Yes, we highlighted that one too.
It doesn't need that in the market. Now, if you have it, that's great. But again, you're bringing it into the organization. If all of your accountants left into hire, you would get no one in the door. Your finance manager, you could say needs to have a CPA, or you hire that piece out. So my job is to look at what's needed for the position. They're giving me input. Their expertise is not what knowledge, do you know what I mean? I'm not going to tell the engineer how a bridge should be inspected, but I am going to challenge them and say the market doesn't support this, and you are not making decisions for the whole organization. You are making decisions for your department, and you might be a supportive function that touches all departments, and that's counted for. But my job is to make sure that we're paying positions fairly and market competitive. Like one of them was the county engineer. I felt that was too low. If your engineer left, you would have a really hard time replacing it. And I don't want to set you up for that. So my job is to look at the value of the job and take that jet and then go through the classification appeal. The employee and supervisor don't have to agree with me, but then we can at least have that conversation. And we may not agree, but we could at least agree to disagree and why it is that way.
Are you also, Tessa, seeing a difference with the assistant county attorneys? I know I had looked at Wadena County, and it seemed to me that they had just upped their wages for
Yeah, so they're
assistant county attorneys?
unique. So their attorneys are pulled separately, so they pay them on a different grid. So that's part of that. But I am definitely seeing, one, I love that you guys have a career ladder already for growth within the place. But those are positions because the public defender's increase was so large that has to be above market. And part of it is the value of their job. I mean, they're keeping you out of litigation and the complexity of their work. So I felt that one was lower too, so that is one that I encourage to be moved up.
All right, thank you.
All right, any other questions for Tessa?
I don't think so.
Thank you very much. You helped us out a lot.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Yeah.
perfect. All right, I will be in contact with Carrie and Pat and the team to figure out next steps and when it works for the board, but I appreciate the board, short notice and being able to discuss this like we did today, I feel is very helpful.
Yeah, I think so too. And if you have information, just forward. I mean, we like the information sooner than later. So when you get it,
Sure.
so we can educate ourselves and maybe ask questions early on to get them. But I feel confident that we're going to get there. Maybe not as fast as we'd like to, but so. Thank you. Any other questions? If not, we'll say goodbye to Tessa. And I don't know if there's any other business. I don't think so,
Nothing
but
on the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
okay, thank you.
Thank
Get to
you.
get your input on this too.